Well, okay. Right off the bat, I must confess that the title here is a little misleading. Here I am actually making a case to my fellow blaspheming heathens, and submitting it for peer review, as it were. I recently read the book Science Friction, Where the Known Meets the Unknown by Michael Shermer, a fascinating read which I heartily recommend. One chapter in this book explored the practice of trying to devise different titles for our particular demographic. Titles which don't have so much misleading pejorative connotation attached. Consider that most of the people watching this video are able to communicate with me and with one another because of a general consensus over how to interpret the words being used here. Without this consensus, verbal communication would not be possible. Unfortunately, sometimes there are those in a position to profit in some way by doing what they can to disrupt this consensus. For example, I saw one video in which PCS was going around interviewing people. Now, I don't remember his exact choice of words in one exchange, but it was something to the effect of, do you believe that there is an objective standard for morality, or is it just subjective, something we make up ourselves? This choice of words is not exactly a false statement, but still intended to mislead, and therefore dishonest. Something we make up ourselves is not the definition of subjective. He doesn't actually claim that it is, so he's not exactly lying, but he suggests it. And he's able to get away with it because, unfortunately, the average individual does not know this particular word or its proper use. Every propaganda machine in the world thrives by doing what it can to divide the populace on the proper use of entire lexicons of words. The two favorite such words are evolution and atheism. This chapter explored such terms as humanist and bright, but a number of critics pointed out a number of problems with these terms. One even suggested the term apatheist to mean one who doesn't care about God belief. But one especially interesting observation continues to resonate with me. I don't remember who it was, but someone pointed out that any title we don and use to refer to ourselves as a group will be given the very same pejorative associative strawman treatment this one has. Therefore, any time we want to discuss our position with a theist, the first major hurdle for us is finding ways to cope with this conditioned association with these strawmen. Here we have someone trained to habitually treat this term a certain way. But of course this is a remarkably undescriptive term. All it really means is that here is someone whose beliefs do not include any gods. It doesn't describe a system of belief. It's not a system of reasoning for figuring out what's real or what's right. This is a state we come to because of the approach we take to this end. There are atheists who refer to themselves as realists, since they make an ethic of believing only in what they have solid reason to believe really exists. But this, it seems to me, doesn't help, since everyone holds this opinion of themselves. Others prefer to call themselves rationalists, since rationality is central to their process of deciding what to believe. This, however, has the very same problem most of the time. Thunderfoot semi-recently made a video in which he announced a new title for himself, which makes, in my humble opinion, a very good attempt at describing, in a nutshell, the system we tend to have in common. He dubs himself a Pearlist. Pearl, the way he uses it, is an acronym for physical evidence and reasoned logic. He dubs himself, not based on the beliefs he holds or the beliefs he abandons, but based on the method he applies in order to decide which claims fall into which category. The idea here is to foster discussion. After all, it's very tricky to discuss a proposition without also investigating it, examining it, and subjecting it to some scrutiny. The objective here is to bring about the chance to explain this process. One who understands it and appreciates it, one to whom the effectiveness of this approach has been demonstrated, surely will adopt it, or at least appreciate it. We all know this is the case, because this is how it was with most of us. But the main reason most of us didn't deconvert sooner was the difficulty involved in getting to this discussion. We heard this word, and promptly latched on to all the strawmen we had been trained to associate with it. This is the difficulty I ran into with my correspondent from a few videos back. So if one wishes to get to the discussion, one must find a way to leave those strawmen out of it. To do that, one must identify oneself with a relatively unknown term with which the average believer has yet to learn any negative connotations. To that end, in such a discussion, we must each identify ourselves with a term which does not apply to the whole group. To this end, Pearlist works as long as it remains fairly unknown. Instead, I personally am going to rely on a much less known term rational empirical dualist. It's kind of a mouthful, I know, but that's the idea. Each term here invites the very discussion. Atheist does not. Consider, let's say that you're in a public place and you come across a table. On the table are a box and two envelopes. The box is not very big, maybe only a few cubic decimeters. You test the box and find it's not very heavy, but sealed shut, and when handled, gives away no clues as to its contents. You then check the envelopes and you find that inside each one is a piece of paper with a claim about the box. On one it says that inside the box is a ceramic duck figurine and nothing else. On the other it says that inside the box is a toy fire truck and nothing else. Observe that given the contradictory nature of both claims, there are two possible conclusions. Either only one is correct, or neither is correct. But what if it's more than two? What if it's 5, no 2 of which are in agreement about the contents of the box? What does that mean? It means that at least 4 must be incorrect, and it does not rule out the possibility that all 5 are incorrect. But what if it's even more than that? What if the box is actually a cubic kilometer, and the table extends for several kilometers in all directions, and the whole thing is covered with envelopes, which can't seem to establish any real measure of agreement about the contents of the box? What would we have then? We would have the world. The world is absolutely awash in contradictory claims about ultimate reality, which means that the overwhelming majority of the claims made in the world cannot be correct. This means that we must have a highly rigorous method for sorting through and, to use a metaphor, separating the wheat from the chaff. Here we have the need for empiricism. That which is perceptible with one's senses is empirical. If you're at the bus stop and you see someone sitting beside you, that's a visual, empirical reason to accept this individual's existence and presence. If the individual coughs and you can hear it, that's an auditory, empirical reason. If you strike up a conversation with this individual, and after a few moments of chit-chat, you and he or she shake hands, then you will probably be able to feel that hand in yours. And that will be a tactile, empirical reason. Sight, sound, and touch are 3 fundamentally different senses. Each can be distorted by things like hallucinogenic elements in the environment, but when that happens, they usually don't agree. So where 3 fundamentally different senses agree, we have as firm a foundation for accepting something as humanly possible. Sensory agreement is a good basis for extrapolating something, and this is where rationalism comes in. Logic, reason, is about making the transition from supporting propositions to supported propositions. But the premises themselves require support, and the most basic support must be empirical in order to allow us to escape this infinite regress. Agreeing empirical observation is the best basis humanly possible for rational extrapolation. This much will be the basis for my next discussion with a theist. I recommend a similar, though cosmetically different approach for any other atheist in getting to this discussion. So what do you guys think? What term would you use in place of pluralist or rational empirical dualist? How would you explain it differently? What different metaphors would you use?